Hello and welcome to our program. My name is Mark Kligman. I'm the interim director of the Eunice and Soraya Nazarian Center for Israel Studies. The Nazarian Center is situated in the UCLA's International Institute. Our center provides academic discourse that addresses Israel's history and culture, both past and present. The program today is sponsored by the Nazarian Center and co-sponsored by the Lowell Milken Center of Music of American Jewish Experience, which I also direct. Our program today is the first in a series of 3 lectures on music in Israel. The other 2 will take place in the spring quarter. Our program today, Music in Israel After October 7th, addresses the day-to-day reality of life in Israel through music. Our presenter is Dr. Naomi Cohn Zentner, who is an assistant professor at Bar-Ilan University in the music department. Her research interests are in ethnomusicology, focusing on sacred songs of the Ashkenazi domestic sphere and the cross-fertilization of Ashkenazi and Sephardi liturgical traditions in Israel. In 2024, she held the Katz Fellowship at the University of Pennsylvania, and in 2019, she was a visiting fellow at the Oxford Seminar in Advanced Jewish Studies, focusing on early Jewish music. In 2022, she was the recipient of a personal research grant from the Israel Science Foundation for a project entitled Embodying Spiritual Sound, New Musical Practices Among Religious Jewish Israeli Women, which she is heading in collaboration with Dr. Abigail Wood at Haifa University. Dr. Naomi Cohn Zentner's work has been published in Hebrew Studies, Ethnomusicology, the Journal of Modern Jewish Studies, and the Oxford Handbook of Jewish Music Studies. It is a real pleasure to introduce Dr. Naomi Cohn Zentner, who is someone I have known for many years. I actually enjoyed the Penn Fellowship together, and I just want to tell you real quick that our format will be Dr. Cohn Zentner will speak and present, and the questions will follow, and we invite you throughout the presentation to put your questions in the Q&A box. So without further ado, Naomi, we look forward to hearing from you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mark, and thank you to the Nazarian Center for Israel Studies at UCLA. I'm very honored to be here. First, there was silence. People often spoke about the fact that right after October 7th, they couldn't, for many days and weeks, they couldn't listen to music, let alone make any music. They couldn't stand to hear any music. For security reasons, all of the music performances were canceled. All of the live performances were canceled. And it was also not perceived as appropriate to sing any music which wasn't directly related to what had happened. Music had to respond to these current events, but what could be appropriate for such a horrific turn of events? And I think this has to do with the way that Israeli pop musicians are seen. They're seen to be the people who most in the time, responding to current events, to social currents. Musicians, they position themselves, but they're also positioned by their society as sort of active commentators on the present reality, more than other public figures, more than any other kind of artists. Those who explain where we are and what it is we're aiming for. And so we're going to be speaking a bit more about musicians and their role. So music after October 7th really reacted to the situation. I think it's safe to say that in general, in life in Israel, and particularly for music, all music was affected. It reflected and it shaped the Israeli public experiences, what had happened. And so there really wasn't any music which was the same. So I think music after October 7th is giving a continuous, multifaceted answer to the question, what is the power of music? And music after October 7th also gave it a renewed understanding of what music can bring to the world and what is the power of music. The power of music is a source of hope and resilience and remembrance, something which can express pain when pain cannot be expressed. So even the practicalities, musicians often release their albums right after the Chagim, the holidays. So even this was really not done. Some albums are only now being put out because it was seen as difficult to sing about anything which wasn't related to what had happened. So I'd like to start today's lecture with a reality show. This is a reality show called HaKochav Haba LaEurovision. It chooses the Israeli Eurovision contestant, and this is something which I watched with my teenage daughter, something which both enjoyed. And this year, last year in particular, and this year even more so, maybe surprisingly, the October 7th events and survivors were very, very present of the entire show. And here what we see is contestant Daniel Weiss. He came to the 4th or 5th place, got almost to the final. And he was part of this competition, which is a reality music competition, where the judges and the audience choose the Israeli contestant who is going to represent Israel in the Eurovision contest, which takes place this year in Basel in May. Last year's entry, the October Rain, had to rename its title and its lyrics to the title Hurricane, because the European Broadcasting Union, which is the one who sponsors the entire event, decided it was breaking the rules of political neutrality by referencing the Hamas attacks on October 7th with the title October Rain, and therefore it changed its name to Hurricane. And the war was very present throughout the reality show. Captain Shauli Gringlick, who was a captain in the reserves and auditioned for the contest in December 23 in uniform while he was on leave in Gaza. He fell in a battle last December. So very much his memory was something which was remembered, and his musicality, which was lost, was something which was part of the program. And it was particularly relevant for the contestant Daniel Weiss, who you see here on the right and down here in the photo. He was a member of the Kibbutz Be'eri, the famous, infamous, terrible story which happened. And he made it up to the final, and his personal story really gave an added meaning to every song he chose to sing. And this is his duet. You can see him, a duet with fellow contestant Israeli Arab Valery Hamati, who he had studied with in the famous Rimon School for Popular Music. And this time it was really particularly poignant because this was the week where his parents, I didn't mention, as you see down here, there's a photo of a performance of Daniel Weiss. He is performing in his burned home in Kibbutz Be'eri. He decided to do a performance there. Both his parents were murdered in Kibbutz Be'eri. And often he mentions that when he sings, he feels as though he's singing and they can hear him, which is relevant to what we're going to see soon, the song where he sings and he mentions them. And here we see a clip of him singing the song Hurricane or October Rain with his fellow contestant. And this was particularly meaningful because this was the week where it had become safe enough to move his parents from their temporary grave in the kibbutz that they had moved to and bring them back and bury them in their final burial in Kibbutz Be'eri. And that is the week where he sang Hurricane. It was very, very meaningful and moving. He also has a very beautiful voice, but also this personal story, which he brought with him to the stage, was particularly emotional. So we're going to see him sing a song which Naomi Shemer wrote, Ani Gitara, I am a guitar. He sang this in I think his first audition, and we're just going to hear the very end section of the song. And the song Ani Gitara, I'm a Guitar was written by Naomi Shemer for Benny Amdurski, who was a very talented singer who was terminally ill, and he had a final performance, and she wrote it especially for him, kind of a retrospective on one's life, and very suitable for Daniel to sing while thinking of his parents. So let's see this performance together.
אני גיטרה, הייתי פעם עץ אולי, ובתיבת התהודה אני זוכר את כל מי שניגן עליי, ואני אומר וואו אבא, אמא, תודה.
So, the winner of this contest, the person who's actually going to represent Israel in this year's Eurovision contest, with a song which has not yet been chosen, is Yuval Rafael. This, you can see her here. And her life was also touched by the October 7th massacre. She was part of the Nova Music Festival, and she survived October 7th by playing dead, hiding under dead bodies in a bomb shelter for many hours until she could escape. And her choice to sing in the final, ABBA's Dancing Queen, in a very uncharacteristically subdued arrangement, very slow tempoed, was dedicated to the memory of the women, the other women who were dancing with her in this festival, which was dedicated to peace and love, in this music festival, and who lost their lives there. And this is, I think, a testament also to how existing music is repurposed and received new meaning, which was given to the lyrics and to the context. So we're going to hear her final song of Dancing Queen by ABBA.
The mood for dance, and when you get the chance, you are the dancing queen, young and sweet, only 17. Dancing queen, feel the beat from the tambourine, oh yeah. You can dance, you can jive, half in the time of your life. See that girl, watch that scene, digging the dancing queen, digging the dancing queen. You're a teaser, you turn.
So you see on the right a quote which she herself said after winning. She was interviewed and she said, "It's a moment where I say how lucky I am to have won, but this song I sing is all about the angels who weren't fortunate enough to be here now. It hurts because I had this chance not only to come back and live, but to fulfill my dream. And there are those who stayed there, and the shadow behind me," you can see there's a shadow of a woman, like a silhouette of a woman, is the only thing left of them. That's why it's important for me to go there, to the Eurovision, and to bring that voice there. So I think this is also a testament to how many existing songs, mainly Hebrew songs, suddenly received new meanings, and people listened with different ears and found different significance and context in things which were familiar already. Many songs of Habaita, Bo Habaita, of course, relating to the people who were abducted and hoping for the kidnapped to return home. And today, actually, thankfully, we had a few more hostages who were released. And so the radio was full of these Habaita songs, which were not written after October 7th, but they are given really new meaning thanks to their relevance to the events and occasions which are part of the current day news. And the Nova Festival, maybe we should talk a little bit about Nova Festival, which is the festival that Yuval Rafael was saved from when she participated in it. So this is a film which was made about the Nova Festival, and you can see it says, "We will dance again." This is a photo from the original concert just before daybreak, which is when we know that the war broke out. And so this is part of the trance community, the EDM, the electronic dance music community, which was seen before October 7th as kind of quite foreign to Israeli mainstream, not really part of like Israeli music. They were seen as part of like a global community of people who like psychedelic trance. And it was also seen as something sort of kind of illegal. There were drugs. It would have to be done in nature. When there was a party, nobody knew where it was going to be. And like a few hours before, it was the word was spread so that the police didn't come and stop them for drug reasons, etc. And so it really wasn't perceived as a mainstream thing at all. And you never heard it on the radio. It wasn't really related to as part of the Israeli musical scene. But after October 7th, the terrible massacre of over 300 people who were murdered from the Nova Festival, and many were abducted and kidnapped into Gaza, and some were killed there, and some were returned, and some are still there. Some people from the Nova Party are still there. And after October 7th, because of this whole history of what happens, the Israeli mainstream kind of much more embraces psychedelic trance as something which could be considered Israeli. There's much more trance on the radio. I hear this from broadcasters who say it's really perceived to be something which is much closer, even though the sound is, I mean, Israel is a global leader. Infected Mushrooms, these bands were considered very successful, but more globally than locally. And so now it's really something which is perceived to be, almost sort of a national music. And then you have DJs and producers and musicians of the EDM, electronic dance music, which are given a cold soldier from what they saw as their community, which was a global community after October 7th. Now they're doing sort of hasbara, they're doing helping Israeli PR through their social media, and they're doing concerts which are more Israeli based. So this slogan of "We will dance again" is kind of a slogan of solidarity and hope and resilience. And you see here a concert which took place in Tel Aviv, not in a nature venue, which is where these concerts usually took place. This is called the Nova Healing Concert. It took place in June in Tel Aviv in a very mainstream venue. And you can see here that among the English language names are those which are more part of the, the Nova community, the psychedelic trance EDM community, whereas the Hebrew names are like Ninet, Asaf Andursky, Noga Erez, Tatikva Shesh, Beri Sakharov, Moshe Ben-Ari. These are mainstream Israeli singers. So they're sort of coming together, and this is kind of a joint concert of EDM DJs and musicians together with mainstream Israeli musicians. And it symbolizes this sort of achdut, as we say, sort of this unity, and it's aimed to show support and also to fundraise for the Nova survivors, who many of them are, have suffered a terrible trauma and need a lot of help and support. And so that is just one of the ways where Israeli music has really been impacted, and the notion of what is Israeli music, of course, also. But besides the notion of listening to existing music with new ears, there's also a lot of new music which was written. And one of the nice projects which was done to commemorate a year after, I'm going to get back to this, a year after October 7th. So this is October 2024. It's called 7 Days in October, of course, referencing October 7th. And you can see here on the right a few of the videos of these songs. So there are 7 songs of fallen soldiers, meaning texts, letters, stories, songs. These are all of soldiers who fell in the war. These are all given to very well-known musicians, Ehud Banai, others, and then they are newly composed and performed as a memorialization. And this is part of a very long-standing tradition of how, for many, many years already, the words of fallen soldiers are set to music, often through this radio station, Galei Tzahal, in the past, now Galgalatz. And so there's part of a very long-standing tradition of remembrance. And it was so common that one of the soldiers, which we're going to hear his song, Yuval Zilber, wrote how it's bad luck for a soldier to write a good poem, because you never know when it's going to be turned into a song. And if you're not a good poet, how come all the people who write such beautiful all the people who are unfortunately die, write such beautiful poetry? And so maybe it's not a good idea to write a poem if you're a combat soldier. So this is his song. Unfortunately, after writing this very cynical and, sort of winking, sort of quite humoristic text about writing songs of fallen soldiers, he too, his words were also turned into a song. He too fell. So this is in his memory. Yuval Zilber. I've decided to put into the chat the lyrics so that you're able to follow a little bit, and you can watch the movie at the same time. So now you have some of the lyrics, and you can see this video, which is done by kind of a rapper, Jimbo J. We're going to see him soon again. And he took the words of the soldier, Yuval Zilber, and wrote this clip. And we see some photos also of this soldier together with the music itself and his words, of course.
אתם יודעים לשמור סוד? יש לי שריטה של לכתוב בקרבי מביא מזל רע. אחרת איך זה שכל הנופלים תמיד כותבים? תמיד משוררים כאלה מוצלחים, מצחיקים, תמיד גיבורים. איך זה שכל הנופלים תמיד משאירים איזה משהו? אז אם אתם קוראים את זה תדעו לכם שיש לי שריטה כמו זמר עם פרפרים שנייה לפני הבמה. זמן קצוב, אי ודאות, ואז הנה זה בא. מרגיש את זה בבטן, אי אפשר לרדת, רכבת הרים, פחד טהור. יש לי שריטה, אומץ לבחור, להיות הבא בתור. אם אתם קוראים את המילים שלי, תבטיחו לי לחיות. יש לי שריטה של לכתוב בקרבי מביא מזל רע. תגיד לי איך זה שכל הנופלים תמיד כותבים? תמיד משוררים כאלה מצחיקים, מבריקים. תמיד הם יודעים איך זה שכל הנופלים תמיד משאירים איזה משהו. אז אם אתם קוראים את זה תדעו לכם שיש לי שריטה שואף אוויר כמעט אוהב ואז עוצר.
Okay, I really apologize for stopping it like this. These songs should be listened to properly. I just want to say this also has to do with a certain practice that there is for soldiers to write a letter before they go into battle, to write a letter of comfort to their family. And the letter is often, if God forbid, something does happen and the family do read it, it's often kind of a final will and testament of like intention, of course, much more than anything to, you know, it's not, it's really more of kind of an ani ma'amin, an I believe kind of thing. And so he says, Im atem korim et ze, if you're reading this, promise me to live a full life, a life which is worth living. And so you understand, often there's a line in these books, in these letters, which the soldiers, of course, hope there's never a need for. If you read this, then this is something which is important for me to tell you. So if you read this, please live a life worth living. So that is part of this project. There are other soldiers whose words were put into song. One of them is called Shachar Friedman. He was one of the best friends of my son. And he wrote a song, a letter to his girlfriend, Noga. And this was also turned into a song in this project of 7 songs in October. But besides the words of these young men who fell in battle, there's also a question of what are musicians themselves? What is their role today? And there's a shifting, I think, sense of purpose and context and function. So these musicians find themselves singing. Here you see singing in a cemetery. Here we see Shlomo Artzi, the man standing in a black shirt on the very back, who is, he's singing in a Shiva house. And he says, Shlomo Artzi says, and I quote, "I've performed in many wars, but I've never been expected to sing at a funeral or a Shiva. I went to a Shiva call now, after October 7th, and I suddenly realized they want me to sing." And so you see he has a guitar player and he sings a song for them. And so in musicians after October 7th were singing in funerals. This is a new thing to sing in funerals. It wasn't ever acceptable. I mean, music and mourning are things in the Jewish tradition very much separated from each other. For a whole year, there should be no music. And now this became something which families would request a singer to come and sing in the funeral. And of course, singers couldn't say no. Singers sang in hospitals for wounded soldiers. They sang for families of kidnapped, for children who evacuated from their homes, for survivors of the massacre. And musicians are expected to give context and perspective and hope and comfort, to give guidance and even to be a kind of spiritual leader in a way, to be able to give a sense of direction and purpose, to understand what it is that's happened to us, and to be a compass giving us a direction for the future. And I interviewed a musician who was a guitar player like this person is, who performed in many funerals of soldiers, including his own cousin, when his cousin fell in battle. And he spoke about how it felt so much more meaningful than playing at a wedding or playing in some reception. You know, he's a professional musician. He really felt as though he's giving people something. And he particularly spoke about music as something which enables people to feel. And if they hadn't cried until that moment, the close family, this was a moment where often this was a time for the emotion to sort of take over. Music was able to do that. And as a musician, he felt as though this was a very important role that he had, and it was very, very meaningful. So that is, I think, also something which has kind of shifted as far as music after October 7th. And many of these fallen soldiers or people who died or were killed, murdered in October 7th were active musicians themselves. So we have a few musicians. Wait just a second. Oh, goodness me. So we have musicians which they themselves were either killed in battle or killed in the Nova. We're going to hear about them soon. But first, let's talk about the kibbutz. The kibbutz, which was always perceived to be kind of this idyllic heaven where you didn't have very much money or a big house, but you had a lot of freedom and a lot of quiet and green. And it was seen as kind of this idyllic place. In 2022, the song of the year was called Stalbet B'Kibbutz, which basically means relaxing in the kibbutz. We're going to hear a little bit of it, just so you get it. By the way, one of these people here is Jimbo J. He sang the song Stalbet B'Kibbutz. He's also the person who we just heard singing A Life Worth Living. So the kibbutz was really seen as a little piece of heaven on earth, a very, very quiet, peaceful place.
כמה זה לחוץ אז למה עיר סטלבט בקיבוץ בחצי מחיר אני לא עובד קשה בשביל להיות עשיר לא מחפש כפיים אם זה לא בסופה עד שמצאתי מה חיפשתי קצת הרגשתי תקוע כמו שליח שלא קולט שבקיבוץ אין רחוב אתה רואה פח? יש פה במפר? וואו, אתה לא קרוב עד שמשהו נפתח בי לא ידעתי שחיפשתי הזקנה על קלנועית שתצא עליי בחור, אתה טס כמו חללית.
Okay, so this is just a small clip of this very relaxing song. You can hear the vibe is all about just sort of chilling in the kibbutz. But unfortunately, the kibbutz also became, after October 7th, we think of the kibbutz as a dangerous place because of so many things which happened. Kibbutz Nir Oz, Kibbutz Kfar Aza, Kibbutz Be'eri. The kibbutzim were the first places in the Otef Aza, around the Gaza Strip, which were attacked, and terrible atrocities happened there. And so the kibbutz became kind of a place of danger and a place of nostalgia of what was there and will never return, of people who were killed. Jimbo J, this man who sang the song, which became the song of the year, he says he can't sing the song anymore. He couldn't sing it for a while. He could come to the concert, the audience would sing it, he'd do the accompaniment, but he couldn't say the words. It was too much to think of how the kibbutz was perceived as kind of this paradise, peaceful place, and then what happened eventually to the people of the kibbutz the next year, a year later. And so one of the interesting songs which was written about the kibbutz, about a week and a half, maybe the first song I heard after October 7th was a song which was written about what's going to happen to the kibbutz from now on. How are we ever going to return to sing? How are we ever going to return to be on the big grass? The big grass is always kind of this symbol of what the kibbutz is. There are no fences between houses. There's just grass and gardens. And the song was written by a band called Jane Bordeaux. And it's called You're Not Alone. We are not alone. And so this is really very, very meaningful about the feelings just right after October 7th and what the kibbutz was and should be, hopefully, in the future again.
העץ שבגינה שלנו לא שרד, נשרף כולו בבוקר מקולל אחד. והגינה עומדת יתומה, ולא נותר מי שישקה בה את האדמה, ומי ישיר בטקס בקיבוץ, ומי ירקוד במעגל על הבמה בחוץ, מי יקשט טרקטורים ועגלות, ומי יקצור את החיטה שבשדות. נושיט כולנו יד, אנחנו לא לבד, שותפי גורל, כאב ואהבה כעם אחד. נבכה ונתגבר, כמו אז לא נשבר, יש לנו רק אחד, את השני ולא יותר, ולא צריך יותר. שורשי העץ נאחזים בלב האדמה, ישובו לעלות לצמוח עם המנגינה, ניגון עתיק של נחמה וצחוק הילדים. אנחנו בית לעצמנו, סוף לנדודים.
This is the second part of the song.
העץ שבגינה שלנו לא שרד, נשרף כולו בבוקר מקולל אחד. והגינה עומדת יתומה.
Okay, I'm moving on to this slide, and hopefully you can see it with me without music accompanying it. But it continues. נושיט כולנו יד, אנחנו לא לבד, שותפי גורל, כאב ואהבה כאיש אחד. נבכה ונתגבר, כמו אז לא נשבר, יש לנו רק את אחד, את השני ולא יותר. So in a way, it's kind of, it ends on a very optimistic note, and these images are taken from the clip. And so I think, as with its tune, which is kind of moving from minor to major, going up in the major and get down in the minor, in a way, it's very much a mixed emotion of sadness with hope for the future. And I think that this is something which is very characteristic of any feeling of happiness in Israel. There's always a tinge of sadness of what could have was lost. There's never a complete happiness. So this song also, I think, musically is exemplifying this notion of there's always going to be a sadness, but in sadness there's also hope. So before we end, I would like to talk about the songs of musicians who were killed. There were many active musicians. You see here only a few whose songs remain after them. We see here Anel Shapira. He's famous for being very heroic and throwing the grenades back out of the shelter. 7 grenades, a shelter which many people were hidden in, and the 8th grenade, he couldn't catch it. It exploded in his hands and he was killed. Many of the people in the bomb shelter were also killed, but several survived, and some were kidnapped, unfortunately. And he put out an album. He was a very active musician. He was also my husband's cousin's son, a very special boy and very musical. And a whole album of his songs were put out after his death, available on Spotify. If you look for Aner Shapira, A-N-E-R, Shapiro, one of his songs called Jiruz. Another famous song, which was very poignant, is called Nefilati, My Last Fall, which really is unbelievable that this was written by Yahel Gazit. He was a tank commander who fell in battle a few weeks after the war began, and this song is about what happens after a soldier falls. Again, very shiver. You hear this and you can't believe that this person wrote this. Very, very powerful. And here we see a picture of Tamar Samet down the bottom, who composed a song called Ech Sarafti Gesher. And so these songs, which were written at the time, now resonate with this really added meaning and have much more significance. So I'd like to end, before we end, one more song of a hero. This is a song written by Yossi Hershkovitz. He was a school principal of a school that my children's friends go to, and he was saying he has, I think, 4 children, and he was sent off into battle in Gaza, and he was an active musician. He played violin, and one day in Gaza, his friend heard him humming something in some house where they were staying. He said, "What are you humming?" He said, "I'm just humming a song which I found." He said, "Did you compose a song?" He said, "Yes." He said, "Oh, sing it to me." So he sang it twice to his friend, and then his friend remembered it. And in the funeral, unfortunately, after Yossi was killed, he sang it to the family. And here we hear Yonatan Razel singing the song together with his friend who learned this song from him. He's the one in the army uniform. And he's singing with him a song of Gam ki elech begeit al mavet lo ira ra from Psalms. And this is the melody of Yossi Hershkovitz, which he sang to himself and found this melody when he was in Gaza a few weeks before he was killed there. So we're going to hear this performance, and that is going to be, I think, maybe our final song, unless we have time for one more, but we'll hear this one first.
גם כי אלך בגיא צל מוות לא אירא רע כי אתה עמדי גם כי אלך בגיא צל מוות לא אירא רע כי אתה עמדי אך טוב החסד ירדפוני כל ימי חיי ושבתי בבית השם לאורך ימים גם כי אלך בגיא צל מוות לא אירא רע כי אתה עמדי גם כי אלך בגיא צל מוות לא אירא רע כי אתה עמדי אך טוב החסד ירדפוני כל ימי חיי שבתי בבית השם לאור אורך ימים.
So this was filmed live in front of an audience as a part of the 1 year occasion of the war. And they sang it together. Mr. Vach, the commander, who was with Yossi when learned this song from him, and Yonatan Ozel together. There's one more song, but I don't think we're going to have time for it. Maybe later if there are more questions and someone asks. I just want to say that really this war has brought with it a lot of pain and also a lot of hope and a lot of resilience of character, and that music has really shown itself to be the power of music has been very much revealed. And I think musicians realize what it is that they bring when they come to sing to wounded soldiers, what it is they bring when they come to sing to a bereaved family, and what power music has to sort of process the mourning and also to give a hope. So that, I think, is what we have for now. And if we have more time later, we'll do one final song.
So Naomi, thank you so much for this wonderful presentation. I just sit here and am weeping and just so emotionally taken by all this music. And thank you so much for putting this together. We have lots of questions, and hopefully we'll get to as many of them as we can. We encourage everyone to put their comments in the Q&A. The first question that keeps on coming from many people is if to the extent that you can, post links to some of these songs, people would really be most appreciative to that. That's the first thing. So we just have many questions. Again, I get to as many of them as I can. There's a question that came in that says, the songs of Daniel Weiss and Yuval Raphael were very moving, but how can such lyrics be explained to the often uninformed and sometimes willfully ignorant audiences at Eurovision Song contests, assuming such songs have any chance at all of being allowed, given the bias of the organizers towards the non-political? And then there's a continuation of this question, that the question is only part of a much larger question. How do we think it is possible to make all this understandable beyond Israel and or the Zionist circles outside of Israel? So I think it brings a really interesting question about the fact that, these are really songs for Israelis. These are songs for Israelis and Israeli healing. And of course, for those that really don't speak Hebrew or really know Israeli Hebrew, it are not getting all the nuances. But I think it's a very meaningful question about, where is this, going to go in different ways? I'm curious your thoughts on that.
This is, I agree, this is definitely a very internal conversation, a musical conversation. The audience is Israeli, the musicians are Israeli, and I think also the situation is kind of revealed that we need to speak to ourselves, because the world outside is not always very understanding. But but there are other questions of how can this be made accessible to the outside world. I think just even as a human tragedy, which music is often very good at, moving across this message of the terribleness of it. I think the Eurovision, there are a lot of people who are very worried that sending someone who has suffered so much personally through this, Yuval Raphael or Daniel Weiss, how will they stand up to the very strong anti-Semitic audiences, even inside the Eurovision hall, who we know from last year were booing and shouting throughout the Israeli song. I just want to mention that these songs are not songs which are going to be sent. The song is being written right now as we speak, and it's going to be presented in a few weeks in Israel. So it can't be an existing song. It has to be a new song. And as we know from last year, it can't be too political, because it's going to be not going to be allowed. It has to be something very much alluding to something which happened with very carefully, because things have to be they have to be accepted by the European Broadcasting Association.
And as we know, Hurricane or October Rain wound up doing far better than anyone ever predicted it to be. And, amid all the bias, it did extraordinarily well
It did.
in the final context. So just some other wonderful questions that have come in. Another one is curiosity, if you have some knowledge about classical music and maybe anything that the Israeli Philharmonic has done or Israeli opera.
Yes, there were projects, very interesting projects for the year anniversary. Excuse me. The Israel Philharmonic had a few concerts where they had Israeli musical, works by Israeli composers, songs which are also about remembrance of the Holocaust, which very much resonated now. And this was definitely something which not just popular music, reacted to. This was part of a larger musical community reacting. Just today, I just saw it on Facebook right before we started. One of the women who were released today, who was kidnapped 480 something days ago, was released today, and her name is Agam Berger, and she is active violin player. She played in high school. My friend was her teacher in high school, and she was famous for the video which they did of her, which was to try and talk about her being there, was about her playing Leonard Cohen's Hallelujah on her violin. And today the Philharmonic Orchestra, in her honor, because she was released spontaneously, played for her, like in a quartet, the Hallelujah by violin players. And so this is a way, everyone feels very much a part of this. So yeah.
Thank you. I'm sure more of that will be coming in days, weeks, and years ahead. So again, there are many questions. Here's another one about the Not Alone, a song you did, I believe, by Jane Bordeaux. There seems to be, this is the question, there seems to be a reference to the text from Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur in the text, Umi B'mayim, Umi Ba'esh, etc., chosen by Leonard Cohen as well. Past and present combined, tradition remembered. Do you see this?
Let me look at the lyrics again. I didn't catch this actually. Let's see.
So I think it's,
who will sing at the ceremony, who will dance, who will decorate tractors, who will harvest the field. Yes, you can definitely be seen as something. Mi b'mayim uvi mi va'esh, mi b'chanika, mi b'srefa. Yeah, but actually the questions here are about, who's going to continue working in the kibbutz, because a quarter of the members, I think, of Nir Oz were either murdered or kidnapped. So it's hard to even begin to understand the numbers and the effect of something like that on a kibbutz community where everyone grew up together and everyone had their role in the kibbutz, everyone had their job. Suddenly there's all these people missing. So the practicalities, who's going to water the plants, who's going to do the kibbutz ceremony, who's going to sing the songs, just what are we going to do? How are we going to continue, sort of thing.
Yeah. Another question, what about Harbu Darbu, the song that I think that came out pretty quickly that by Ness and Stila. What about Winter 23, Odeya and EZ? Those are not things I'm familiar with. So many more songs that were much more popular and culturally significant than what was presented. So obviously there's a lot of music, and some music became very popular very quickly through media, social media, and so forth. So please.
Yes, Harbu Darbu actually was by a duo which we didn't really know, Ness and Stella, and it was very much in the genre of the sort of we're going to beat them kind of song. It was very sort of upbeat. It was part of kind of the hip hop world, and it was some saw it as kind of a revenge, we're going to beat you kind of song, and they thought it was tasteless. But for many Israelis, it did give a sense of, we'll get through this. This is a war. We're not going to lose. We're going to win it. And then it really goes on to mention all the army units and sort of give them motivation and morale. But there's 200 plus songs on a playlist we began to compile and gave up after 200 songs of the war. This is something which everyone was affected by. Nobody could continue as usual. So the amount, just the sheer volume of the repertoire of these new songs in the last year is just astounding. And so no, we didn't have time to play all of them today in the 35 minutes we had. But I really suggest looking into this. And I know that Dr. Tanya Sermer has a online course on 4-part course on the music of October 7th. So this is something I think we're going to be discussing a lot in the future.
Right. We can provide people information on Tanya Sermer's course. So again, several more questions. 2 of my favorite post-October 7th songs are by the singer, high-tech entrepreneur, Yoni Bloch, both of which are favorites of the editors and DJs of 88 FM. They are
Softo.
Amechayam Lehamadbar, from the river to the sea, and this new song, Sof Tov, a good end, which imagines peace breaking out in Israel and the region.
Yeah, Sof Tov is an amazing song. And the clip, which is AI generated, is even more crazy. I recommend looking up Sof Tov on YouTube. If you want, I can find the link for you and post it. It's about like the end of all of the bad things. All the bad things went away. All the people who were kidnapped return. There's peace in the land. There's a huge party on Har HaBayit, on the Mount of the Dome of the Rock, where all of the people of all different religions just come together and peace. It's just amazing. For many people, this was kind of it just gave a breath of fresh air in a time of total despair. It even got Israel going to the final of the World Cup in football, which that maybe is a bit too far. Forget world peace, but actually Israel coming to the final, that was a bit too much as far as euphoria. Yeah, Sof Tov and Yoni Bloch is really amazing. It was one of the songs which was on this presentation. In the end, I didn't have time for it.
Do Israelis ascribe religious meaning or power to these public concerts of tragedy and related music? If so, how does this manifest? So I think the question is really trying to show a very interesting part of Israeli culture of how religious meaning comes in, even in what might normally be a more secular context. And of course, there's a long history of this with the Unatan Tokef, after the war in October of 73, and a very, very long history of religious metaphors and what are considered to be, popular songs in Israel. And of course, Yonatan Rizel and, many other singers, Yishai Ribo, are blurring so many lines like that.
Yes, I think there are a lot of belief-based pop songs which are very popular now, and very much tuning into the sort of nationalistic Am Yisrael Chai sentiment. And also, I think that really religious songs, even liturgical songs, are receiving added meaning, and often performances in front of soldiers will assume that they come from a kind of traditional Masorti Mizrahi home, and include sections from Slichot and very religious songs, even by secular musicians, as a sense that this is a great time of great need, and of sort of biblical proportions, and therefore things often sort of are quite closely connected to a worldview of emunah, of belief, of God looking after us and being with us, and Am Yisrael. This has to do with deeper cultural currents in Israeli society, which are going closer to the world of religion and tradition as sources of power and empowerment. Definitely.
So we're unfortunately in need of trying to wrap up, and if you are able to put some links that you can in the chat, or just information where people can go, that would be wonderful. But I invite everyone to just look at the chat, as there's some links that people have already posted if people are interested. And just want to say to you, Dr. Naomi Cohn Zentner, thank you so much for taking a very, very difficult topic of, as you said, just hundreds of songs that's just constantly developing. And this is just the beginning of this type of study. And you to show us how powerful music is and the role of musicians. Thank you so much.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for everyone to listening. I know it's not easy, and it's very emotional, but it's also, there's some hope there also. So thank you very much, and I will try and now put some links into the chat. So if anyone wants to stay on, in a few minutes, I'll be able to share some more links with you.
Sure. And while you're doing that, I'll just remind everyone that today's program was recorded and will be put on the Nazarian Center's website and the YouTube channel. And also, we invite you to join our mailing list. Links have been posted into our chat, and to visit our website for upcoming programs. Next week, our in-person program will be with Yossi Balin, former ambassador to Israel, on February 6th. Yossi Balin's talk is Israel-Palestinian Peace Possible in the Foreseeable Future. This will take place on February 6th at UCLA's Fowler Museum at 5:30 p.m. Our program after that will be the first in a new series organized with the Tel Aviv University's Alliance Center for Iranian Studies on the relationship between Israel and Iran. The program will take place on February 13th, which will be an online program, and this will feature Professor Meir Litvak of Tel Aviv University speaking on anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism in modern Iran. Before we go for the day, I want to give our thanks to Gage Greenspan, who's our Nazarian Center Communications Manager and behind-the-scenes guru to make sure that all things work. So big thanks to Gage. And just want to alert everyone who's still online to look and see that a lot of links have been put into the chat for you. We'll stay on another couple minutes so people can see that chat. And just once again to say to Dr. Naomi Cohn Zentner, thank you so much. We had so many wonderful questions. We'll try and gather those questions for you so you can see just the wonderful impact of this lecture. And of course, beyond the questions, there are just many comments of thanks to you. So once again, toda rabah.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mark. B'sorot tovot, as they say, we should have good future tidings.